This is Jerusalem. Some say it's Israel, and some say that it's Palestine. This might be the longest continuous conflict in world history that still disturbs the masses with heart-wrenching visuals shared in global news. The Israel-Palestine conflict. This topic is so controversial that people across the world are divided in their opinion. So let's dive into this topic and discover why this issue exists. The roots of this conflict stem from thousands of years ago. You all must know what happened during World War II. The German dictator Adolf Hitler terribly massacred the European Jews. However, the ill feelings about Jews were not new at that time. The hate was brewing for a long time. The religion was ill-treated by the Europeans, and its followers were seen as evils. They were treated as second-class citizens and were physically tortured at times. As a result of the continuous humiliation at the hands of the Europeans, Jews started to see themselves more like an ethnicity rather than a religious group. Jews around the world began to feel the need for their own country, a Jewish nation. An Austro-Hungarian journalist Theodor Herzl 1896 started a new political movement called Zionism. This movement yearned for an independent Jewish country. However, this was just the loudest propagation of the idea at that time, otherwise the Jews had already started migrating from Europe. In 1881, the first such large-scale migration took place in which Jews settled in the Palestinian land. They built permanent settlements in the area and started living there. So, there might be a question that appears in your mind. Why did they choose this area specifically? The choice was made on religious grounds. It was a holy land for the Jews as they considered Jerusalem the birthplace of their religion. At that time this whole area was neither Israel, nor disputed with any other country. Whole of the land was Palestinian back then, controlled by the Ottoman Empire. Under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, the followers of three Abrahamic religions, Christians, Muslims, and Jews lived together peacefully. There was no conflict at that time. The problems started to appear later. In 1915, the World War I began. The British, French, and Arab revolutionaries attacked the Ottoman Empire. The British deceived their Arab partners. They promised the Arabs that whole of the Arab land including the Palestinian territory will be given to them to establish a unified Arab country. The British made a similar agreement with the Jews of Palestine as well. They promised the Jews that a new Jewish state will be established on the Palestinian land, if Jews revolt against the Ottomans. Here the greatest twist comes. The British also made a secret deal with the French. The terms of this secret agreement were to divide the area of the Middle East between themselves, as soon as the Ottoman Empire is defeated. We all can see how the British tried to play with all the parties in order to fight the Ottoman Empire. As the Ottoman Empire fell, the British only respected its treaty with the French and divided the Middle Eastern territory of the Ottomans between themselves. Palestinian area was completely taken over by the British. Hence from 1918 to 1948, the area was controlled by the Britishers. In the meantime, Adolf Hitler rose to power in Germany. Crimes against Jews exacerbated and millions were killed in a genocide. In order to save their lives, Jews started to flee the Hitler-controlled Europe. Many decided to go to their Holy Land to get refuge. The British government based in Palestine allowed the Jews to come. As a result, an Israeli nationalist movement started in Palestine. At the same time, the Arab population started a Palestine nationalist movement. Both the movements were demanding the creation of a sovereign state of their own. In 1948, the British withdrew from this area and tasked the United Nations with the responsibility to establish a Palestinian and an Israeli state. In 1947, United Nations drafted a partition plan where 55% of the territory was given towards the creation of a Jewish state, and 45% was allocated for Palestine. Under this plan, Jerusalem was to be controlled internationally. This was done because the city serves as a very important place for both Islam and Judaism. The plan was accepted by the Jews, and the State of Israel was born in 1948. Whereas, the Arabs were not pleased with the plan at all. They thought that international powers were trying to snatch their holy land from them. As a result of the building animosity, the Arab nationalists, with the help of neighboring Arab countries, declared war on Israel. Here the First Arab-Israeli War took place in 1948. More than 5 Arab countries declared war on the small newly established Israel. This was a historic battle for the Jews, as they knew what happened with them in Germany. They knew that if they lose this battle, it will be impossible for them to survive. It was an existential battle for the Jews. So to save themselves, they fought with all they had. Surprisingly, the Israelis won the war. It was a big blow for the Arab states. After the war ended, Israel had captured a large chunk of land which was reserved for the Palestinians by the United Nations. The area of West Bank was occupied by Jordan, and the Gaza Strip was captured by Egypt. More than 700,000 Palestinians had to leave their homes and become refugees in these Arab countries. This was termed the Great Palestinian Exodus. In 1967, a second Arab-Israeli war took place. This was named the Six-Day War, as it lasted 6 days. Again, Israel emerged victorious. This time Israel was able to occupy not only Gaza Strip and West Bank area, but also the whole of the Sinai region of Egypt. In 1964, the Palestinian Liberation Organization was founded with the sole intent of the creation of Palestine. Initially, the organization tried its hands at an armed struggle against Israel, to eliminate its existence of Israel. Due to this ideology, USA and Israel designated PLO as a terrorist organization. The West and Israel saw PLO as terrorists, while the Arabs saw them as revolutionaries. In 1974, PLO was officially recognized by the United Nations General Assembly as the representatives of the Palestinian people. In 1979, Egypt and Israel concluded successful peace talks, which led to Israel handing over the Sinai Peninsula back to the Egyptian government, and Egypt in return recognized the existence of Israel. Egypt became the first Arab country to recognize Israel. Now, since the 1967 war, Israel was controlling the Gaza Strip and the West Bank region. During this period, many Israelis started establishing their colonies in West Bank, now termed the illegal Israeli settlements. The Israeli government supported these people by encouraging such moves. The international community deems these settlements to be illegal, as they were a direct contradiction to the United Nations partition plan. In 1992, Israel elected a left-leaning prime minister, Yitzhak Rabin. This prime minister openly denounced the declaration of PLO as a terrorist organization and opened the channel for peace talks. He was noted saying that a Palestinian country shall exist. Under this tenure, Israel recognized PLO, and in return, PLO recognized Israel as a country. Here, 1993, Oslo Accord took place. For the first time, Israeli and Palestinian leaders met, and exchanged pleasantries. Both, the Israeli PM, and PLO leader Yasser Arafat were awarded with Nobel Peace Prize. As a result, in 1994, a Palestinian government was formed, named Palestinian Authority. But this time, it was too late. Permanent Israeli settlements in West Bank were already flourishing, and more people were moving to West Bank. Understanding the complexity of the issue, it was decided to divide Palestine into 3 regions. Area A, which would be under the Palestinian government. Area B, where both Palestinian and Israeli governments would coordinate and exercise joint control. And the third would be Area C, where Israeli military and government would have exclusive control. This all did not go well with the Israeli nationalists. The extremists believed that they need to control whole of the area, and evict the Palestinians. Enraged, some right-wing extremists assassinated the Israeli PM. These fanatic Jewish groups did not tolerate peace with Palestinians. The situation worsened after this, and all negotiations for peace stalled. Like the fanatic Jews, some extremist Muslims formed Hamas, an organization that pledged the annihilation of Israel, and questioned the secular and peaceful approach of PLO. Hamas started to carry out suicide bombings in Israel. The hostility among both sides grew, giving birth to an extremist right-wing mindset. Nowadays, both sides are extremely polarized. Both the groups are so skeptical of each other that Israel has started building walls around its settlements on West Bank. Security guards are deployed to protect the houses owned by Israelis, and checkpoints are installed to increase the scrutiny. This has made it difficult for the Palestinians to live in those areas. In 2006, the Hamas group contested Palestinian elections and won. The internal situation in Palestine went downhill and a civil war started between PLO and Hamas in 2007. The infighting was named the Battle of Gaza. As a result of this, Palestine was divided into two parts. In Gaza Strip, Hamas established itself as the primary power, and PLO took over control of West Bank. The PLO-ruled West Bank is pretty much a peaceful area where instability is occasional. However, the Hamas-controlled Gaza has deeper issues with Israel. So, this is the history of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Clashes between Palestinians and the Israeli military are common in the Jerusalem region, and Israeli military often carries out airstrikes in Gaza. Presently, the scenario is in a stalemate, with Israel having occupied a large chunk of the land, Palestine existing in pieces, and Gaza under a blockade. Some extremists on the Israeli side believe that the whole area shall be under Israeli control, while Palestinian extreme nationalists want to eradicate Israel as a country. There are neutral commentators of whom some want the 1967 borders restored, and some want to restore the 1947 borders in line with the United Nations partition plan. But, the problem with the stance of neutral commentators is that nowadays, the illegal settlements are very large with a population of over 600,000 Israelis. Here I will pass on the question to you all viewers. What do you all think can be a viable solution to this conflict which is acceptable to both sides? How should the countries be divided? I want every viewer to answer this question in the comments section below. If your answers are good enough, then I will reply to them as well. Do leave a like if you enjoyed this walk through the history of this turbulent region. Comment down your video suggestions. Follow our Twitter account to engage in healthy discussions with us. Subscribe to stay updated, and share our videos. Till then, goodbye.